Be me simple guy. Work in the marketing department of a mid-size B2B company, not a superstar, not a slacker. Just clock in, do my job well. Clock out. Our company sells specialized components. The kind of stuff you don't see on a shelf, boring to most people, but it's a solid business, and we were the best at it for years. The place ran like a well-oiled machine. The reason for that was basically three guys, Aaron, Ismail, and Sean. These guys weren't just employees. They were the pillars the whole place was built on. Aaron was our lead salesman, the kind of guy you see in movies, but never think is real. Not a loud, aggressive jerk. The complete opposite. He was calm, remembered everything about his clients, and they trusted him completely. We're talking about multi-million-dollar accounts that were with us for over a decade. Purely because of Aaron, he'd get a call from a client freaking out about a deadline, and he'd just calmly walk them through it, maybe even drive a shipment to the airport himself if he had to. The guy was a living legend in our industry. Then there was Ismail, the head of marketing strategy. Total opposite of Aaron. Quiet, analytical, probably spoke about 100 words a day, but his brain was on another level. He'd lock himself in his office with spreadsheets and market data, and a week later he'd come out with a report that would literally map out our entire sales strategy for the next 6 months. He knew what our competitors were going to do. Before they did, his strategies fed Aaron and the sales team a constant stream of high-quality leads. They weren't just guessing. They were following a roadmap laid out by a genius. And finally, there was Sean, the sales manager. Sean was the glue. He was an in-the-trenches kind of boss. If a deal was going south, he'd jump on the call with his guys. If someone was having a bad quarter, he'd work with them, coach them, not threaten them. He knew everyone on his team, their strengths, their weaknesses. He fought for our bonuses, defended us from upper management, and created a team that was loyal and incredibly effective. The sales floor was always buzzing with energy, a healthy competition, because everyone respected Sean and wanted to deliver for him. The money was good, morale was high, and we were crushing our targets every single quarter. Life was simple and made sense. You worked hard, you were good at your job, you were rewarded. That all changed a few months back. The owner, an old guy who founded the company but was pretty much retired, decided we needed to modernize. We all thought that meant new computers or a better coffee machine. We were wrong. It meant we were getting a new head of HR. It meant we were getting Serena. She walked in on her first day, and the entire atmosphere of the building shifted. She had this look of constant, low-level disapproval, like she'd smelled something bad and was trying to find the source. The first email came out a few days later. It was a masterpiece of corporate nonsense, full of words like synergy, paradigm shift, and fostering inclusive dialogues. My first thought was, oh great, one of these. But I had no idea how bad it was going to get. Her first major act was to schedule a series of mandatory all-day workshops. The topic was unpacking systemic bias in the workplace. We all had to sit in the big conference room while a consultant she hired talked at us for 8 hours. The consultant kept talking about male-dominated spaces and how traditional sales metrics can perpetuate harmful patriarchal structures. MFW. I'm just trying to sell gear components, and now I'm part of a patriarchal structure. Sean tried to politely argue a point, saying that our metrics are based on performance, not gender. The consultant gave him a pitying smile and said his reaction was a textbook example of defensive fragility. Sean, a guy who could handle the most aggressive corporate negotiators, just shut up and stared blankly at the wall for the rest of the day. Serena sat in the corner, nodding approvingly, taking notes on a clipboard. You could feel her eyes on all the men in the room, especially the sales guys. It was like she wasn't seeing employees. She was seeing problems that needed to be solved after the workshops. Things started getting weird. Serena began inserting herself into departmental meetings she had no business being in. She'd sit in on the weekly sales meeting, not saying a word, just observing after one meeting where Aaron celebrated landing a huge new client after months of work. Serena pulled him aside later. I heard from a colleague that she'd counseled him on his aggressive and overly competitive language, suggesting he use more collaborative terminology. In the future, Aaron was baffled he'd just made the company a fortune, and he was being treated like a misbehaving child. She started a new anonymous feedback system. Suddenly, little complaints started being filed. Sean's team was too loud and created an intimidating environment for quieter colleagues. Ismail was unapproachable and didn't foster a team-oriented atmosphere. Aaron was accused of monopolizing high-value clients. It was obvious this was all being encouraged by Serena. She was building a case. Brick by brick, she spent a lot of time with the owner, showing him charts and graphs, not sales charts, of course, because those were spectacular. She showed him salary comparison charts. She pointed out that the highest earners in the company were, by a large margin, the men on the sales team. Aaron, Sean, and their top guys were making serious money because of their commission structure. Serena presented this not as evidence of their success, but as a problematic wage gap. She argued that their high salaries were creating a culture of inequality. She told the owner they were overpaid and that the company was financially exposed by relying on a few prima donna salesmen. The owner, who hadn't been involved in the day-to-day for years, only saw the numbers she wanted him to see. He saw a chance to cut payroll costs dramatically. He didn't see that he was cutting out the heart of his own company. The tension in the office became unbearable. Everyone knew something was coming. People stopped talking in the break room. Emails became carefully worded to avoid any problematic language. The sales floor, once the loudest and most energetic part of the building, became quiet and anxious. Then the day came. It was a Thursday. I think Serena's assistant went around and called Ismail, then Sean, then Aaron, into the main conference room. One by one, each meeting took about 10 minutes. Ismail came out first, completely pale. He didn't even go back to his desk, just walked straight out the front door without looking at anyone next. Was Sean. He walked out, looked over at his team, and just gave a small, sad shake of the head. He cleaned out his desk in 5 minutes, and then he was gone, finally. Aaron, when he came out, he wasn't sad or pale. He was angry. He made a beeline for the owner's office, but the door was locked. He just stood there for a moment, shook his head, and then left. We later found out they were all fired for corporate restructuring. Their positions were being eliminated to create a more streamlined and equitable organizational structure. Along with them, about half of the senior sales team was also let go. All men, all high earners. The office was in a state of shock. We were looking at the empty desks of the people who had built this company, and it just didn't seem real the very next day. Serena called an all-hands meeting. We all shuffled into the conference room, the same room where the guys had just been fired. Serena stood at the front, beaming. She gave a speech about a new chapter for the company, a chapter of collaboration, inclusivity, and sustainability. She said we were now free from the old, aggressive, growth at all costs mindset. She announced that they had already hired replacements, a whole new team of fresh-faced marketing and sales associates who would bring new energy and diverse perspectives. Then, to top it all off, she announced we'd be having a party that afternoon to celebrate. Celebrate what? We were all thinking, celebrate the destruction of our own company? That afternoon, 2 women from HR rolled in a cart with a cheap-looking sheet cake and some plastic cups of champagne. The cake had "A New Beginning" written on it in bright pink icing. Serena stood in the middle of the office, holding a plastic cup, and gave a toast to our bold future and to breaking down the old structures. She and the handful of new hires she'd brought in were laughing and cheering. The rest of us just stood there in silence, staring at the cake. I remember looking at the empty desks, then looking at Serena celebrating, and feeling a kind of cold dread. It felt like watching a ship captain throwing the navigator and the chief engineer overboard, and then celebrating with a party on the deck while sailing directly into a hurricane. She actually thought she had won. She thought she had fixed the company. She had no idea that she had just signed its death warrant. The party was the most surreal and uncomfortable 2 hours of my professional life. The new hires were all very young, all very eager to impress Serena. They talked loudly about their ideas for the company. Lots of buzzwords, very little substance. One of them suggested our main marketing focus should be our company's TikTok account. We sell industrial-grade hydraulic fittings to factories. Another wanted to redesign our entire product catalog to be more aesthetically pleasing, not understanding that our clients cared about technical specifications, not pretty colors. It was like listening to aliens trying to describe a business they had never seen. Meanwhile, the veterans who hadn't been fired were huddled in small groups, speaking in whispers. The mood was a mix of anger, fear, and utter disbelief. Everyone was updating their resumes on their phones under the table. Serena, completely oblivious, walked around trying to mingle. She came up to my group and asked why we weren't celebrating one of my older colleagues, a guy who had worked with Sean for 15 years, just looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'm not in a festive mood," then turned and walked away. Serena's smile faltered for just a second. She just scoffed and muttered something about some people being resistant to positive change. That party felt like the end of an era. The old company, the successful, merit-based, no-nonsense place we had worked at, was officially dead in its place. Was this hollowed-out corporate shell run by an ideologue who didn't know the first thing about our business? We all knew what was coming. We just didn't know how fast and how catastrophically it would happen. The first Monday after the purge was like walking into a different company. The new hires were at their desks, bright and early. They were all very busy, personalizing their email signatures and decorating their workspaces with inspirational quotes, actual work. Not so much the first problem hit immediately. Aaron's phone, which was now forwarded to one of the new girls, started ringing off the hook. It was his clients, and they were confused and angry. The new girl had a script prepared by Serena. "Aaron is no longer with the company. My name is Jessica, and I'll be your new point of contact. I'm excited to synergize with you." I listened to one of these calls. It was a train wreck. The client on the other end was a gruff, old-school factory owner from Ohio. He didn't want to synergize. He wanted to know why the custom order he had discussed with Aaron wasn't in the system. The new girl had no idea what he was talking about. She didn't know the client, the product codes, or the custom specifications. She put him on hold to ask for help, but there was no one left who knew Aaron's accounts in that detail. The client hung up an hour later. An email came through from their head office, officially pausing their account with us. That was the first domino. By the end of the week, 3 of Aaron's mid-sized accounts had done the same. They weren't interested in building a new relationship with some 22-year-old who sounded like a corporate PR bot. Their relationship was with Aaron, the person when he was gone. So was their loyalty. Serena's response to this was to hold a meeting. Her solution wasn't to try and understand the client's needs. It was to criticize the new girl for not being confident enough on the phone. She declared that the old client relationships were unhealthy and based on cronyism. Anyway, she said this was a perfect opportunity to build a new, more diverse client base. How? She didn't say. Then the marketing side started to fall apart. Without Ismail, we had no strategy. His locked office was like a tomb, containing all the secrets to our success. Serena appointed one of her new favorites as the interim marketing head. Her big idea was to scrap Ismail's data-driven approach. She called it stale and uninspired. Instead, she wanted to focus on brand storytelling. Our new marketing campaign was a series of social media posts with stock photos of smiling, diverse people in hard hats. The captions were vague platitudes about building the future together and engineering with a conscience. It got a few dozen likes, mostly from our own employees who were probably told to engage with it, but the leads, the actual inquiries from potential customers that Ismail's work used to generate by the dozens every day, dried up completely. The pipeline went from a fire hose to a slow drip, and then to nothing. The sales team had no one to call. The remaining senior guys, the ones who had survived the purge, were growing more and more frustrated. They were used to a steady flow of warm leads from Ismail's team. Now they were being told to cold call from outdated lists. Their morale was in the gutter, without Sean there to guide them and fight for them. They felt abandoned. They saw the writing on the wall one by one. They started leaving. They didn't make a scene. They just quietly accepted offers from our competitors and disappeared every week. Another desk would be empty. Serena didn't seem to care in another one of her brilliant meetings. She claimed their departure was a good thing, a self-cleansing process that was removing people who weren't aligned with our new corporate values. Within 6 weeks of the purge, the entire experienced sales force was gone. All that was left was Sean's old territory, now managed by a handful of Serena's clueless new hires, the sales board on the wall, which used to be filled with names and numbers exceeding their targets, was now almost completely blank. It was a ghost ship, and Serena was the captain, proudly telling everyone how wonderful the silence was. The first month was a slow-motion car crash. The second month was the car hitting a wall and bursting into flames. The numbers for the first quarter after the firings came out, and they were apocalyptic. It wasn't a dip. It was a nosedive off a cliff. Sales were down almost 80% from the previous quarter. Any sane leader would have hit the panic button, called an emergency meeting, and tried to figure out a way to stop the bleeding. Not Serena. She scheduled another all-hands meeting. We all filed into the conference room, expecting to be told the company was folding. Instead, Serena stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation. The first slide read, "Redefining Success, a New Paradigm." For the next hour, she talked at us. She claimed the sales numbers were misleading. She said they represented a shedding of an outdated, growth-obsessed business model. She explained that our old clients were not value-aligned with our new company culture. My jaw was on the floor. She was literally describing the complete and utter failure of the company as a planned strategic success. She then unveiled her grand plan to save the company. It wasn't to hire experienced salespeople or create a viable marketing strategy. Her plan was to launch a corporate wellness initiative, mandatory yoga sessions on Wednesday mornings, a gratitude circle every Friday afternoon, an office-wide competition to name the new ficus tree in the lobby. She presented this with a completely straight face, as if a well-named plant was going to magically bring back millions of dollars in lost revenue. People in the room looked stunned. It was beyond parody. The finance department was in open revolt. The CFO, a guy who had been with the company for 20 years, tried to reason with her. He showed her the cash flow projections. He explained in simple terms that at this burn rate, the company would be insolvent in less than 6 months. Serena's response was to accuse him of having a scarcity mindset and being resistant to innovation. She told him he needed to think outside the box and manifest abundance. The CFO resigned the next day. With him gone, the last real check on Serena's power was removed. The owner was still MIA, presumably trusting her completely. The office became a bizarre dystopia. The new hires, Serena's loyalists, embraced the wellness initiatives with gusto. They would have loud, performative conversations about their mindfulness journey and how centered they felt after yoga. Meanwhile, the rest of us, the few remaining veterans, were watching our lifeboats sink. Our workloads had doubled as we tried to cover for the people who had left. Our departments were being starved of resources because all the budget was being funneled into Serena's pet projects, like a full-scale rebranding campaign. She spent a fortune hiring an outside agency to design a new logo and a new mission statement. We spent an entire workday in another mandatory workshop, this time debating the wording of the mission statement. The final version was a meaningless word salad about empowering stakeholders through sustainable, human-centric solutions to catalyze global harmony. Again, we sell hydraulic fittings. The new logo was a pastel green swoosh. It looked like the logo for a spa. While we were debating fonts and colors, the real world kept intruding. The production floor had to shut down one of its lines. With no sales, inventory was piling up in the warehouse. Logistics was a nightmare. The new sales team constantly promised clients delivery dates that were impossible, then blamed the shipping department when things were late. The company was rotting from the inside out, and Serena was busy applying a fresh coat of paint to the exterior. The most infuriating part was her complete refusal to accept any responsibility. Every problem was someone else's fault. When clients complained, it was because they were stuck in old ways of thinking. When production slowed, it was because the factory workers had a poor work ethic. When the best remaining employees quit, it was because they lacked the vision to be part of our future. She had an excuse for everything, and every excuse placed the blame on the very people who were trying to keep the place afloat. Then the rumors started. At first, it was just whispers. Someone heard from a supplier that Aaron was spotted having lunch with a major competitor. Then someone else saw on a professional networking site that Ismail had updated his status to founder of a new strategic consultancy. The pieces started to come together. They hadn't just gotten new jobs. They had teamed up. Aaron, Ismail, and Sean had started their own firm. This news spread through the office like wildfire. It was all anyone talked about in hushed tones. It was a source of hope for us, a sign that competence and talent couldn't be suppressed forever. For Serena, it was proof of a conspiracy. In a manager's meeting, she openly accused them of poaching our clients and sabotaging our business. She claimed their new venture was an unethical attack launched by disgruntled former employees. She was actually trying to frame herself as the victim. The company was crumbling because of her decisions, and she was trying to pin it on the very people she had forced out. The final act began, as we all knew it would, with our biggest client, a company called Apex Manufacturing. They weren't just a client, they were a partner. Aaron had cultivated that relationship for over a decade. Their annual contract was worth more than all our other clients combined. That contract was up for renewal. In the old days, Aaron would have been working on this for months, flying out to meet them, negotiating the details, ensuring everything was perfect. Serena's new team's approach was to send them a standardized renewal form via email. They addressed it to the wrong person. A week went by with no response, then 2 weeks. Panic started to set in, even in Serena's bubble of denial. She tasked her top new salesperson, the girl who wanted to run our TikTok account, to get it done. What followed was one of the most embarrassing sequences of events I have ever witnessed. The girl called the main Apex number and got stuck with a receptionist. She couldn't get through to the key decision maker because she didn't know his name. She sent follow-up emails that were full of typos and corporate jargon. Finally, she managed to get the purchasing manager on the phone. He was a guy who was used to dealing with Aaron, who knew his business inside and out. The new girl started reading her sales script to him. He cut her off and asked a highly technical question about integrating our components with their new assembly line. She had no idea. She put him on hold to Google it. He hung up. This was the moment the bomb finally went off. A few days later, a package arrived at the office. It was delivered by a courier, addressed directly to the owner. The receptionist, who knew something big was happening, hand-delivered it to the owner's office. The owner hadn't been seen in the building for weeks. Turns out he was there that day. He'd been summoned by the new CFO, the one who replaced the guy who quit, who had basically told him the company was about to default on its loans. What happened next is now the stuff of office legend. The owner, a man we all thought was a doddering old fool, apparently read the contents of the package and transformed. He burst out of his office holding a single sheet of paper. He didn't walk. He stomped through the main office, past the silent, staring employees, directly towards Serena's glass-walled office. Serena was in a meeting with her rebranding consultants, looking at color swatches for the new letterhead. She saw the owner approaching and smiled, clearly expecting to be praised for her hard work on the new brand identity. The owner threw the door open so hard it banged against the wall. He didn't say a word. He just slammed the letter down on the table in front of her, scattering the color swatches. Serena's smile vanished. He then threw a thick folder down next to it. It was the quarterly financial report. He pointed at the letter. Then he pointed at the report. "Explain this," he said. His voice wasn't yelling, but it was filled with an ice-cold fury that was way more terrifying. Serena picked up the letter. We could all see her face through the glass. We saw the color drain from it. We saw her hands start to tremble. It was the official contract termination letter from Apex Manufacturing, but it was the last paragraph that was the real killer. A colleague who saw it later told me what it said. It read, "We wish you the best in your future endeavors. We have decided to transfer our entire account to AIS Consulting, a new firm founded by our longtime and trusted partner, Aaron, whose expertise we consider indispensable to our operations." It was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof. Serena looked up at the owner, her eyes wide with panic. She opened her mouth and started to speak. All her usual excuses came pouring out. "This is a coordinated attack. They've been planning this. It's a sabotage campaign because they couldn't handle a woman in a leadership position." The owner let her talk for about 30 seconds. Then he held up his hand, and she fell silent. He leaned over the table, his voice low but carrying throughout the deathly quiet office. He told her that he had spent his entire life building this company. He had built it on quality, relationships, and results. He said he had made a terrible mistake. He had trusted a smooth talker with a fancy vocabulary who knew nothing about business. He said she hadn't modernized his company. She had destroyed it. Then he delivered the final blow. He looked her right in the eye and said, "Serena, your leadership has created a toxic and unproductive work environment. Your performance metrics do not align with the company's strategic goals. This constitutes a fundamental failure to perform your duties." He used her own soulless corporate language against her. It was poetic. "Pack your personal belongings. Security will escort you from the building." Her face crumbled. The mask of confident, progressive leadership shattered, and all that was left was a shocked, defeated person. She was fired, in front of everyone, humiliated in the same way she had humiliated others. Security guards came and stood by her door as she packed her box of personal items. She didn't look at anyone. She couldn't. As they walked her out the front door, for the first time in months, a sound erupted in the office. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Someone started clapping, then another person, and another. It wasn't a celebration, it was a release. The release of months of frustration, anger, and anxiety. It was the sound of justice. Of course, it was too late for the company. The loss of Apex was the final nail in the coffin. The company was declared bankrupt within 2 months. The owner had to sell off the assets, the machinery, the client lists, what was left of them, for pennies on the dollar. We all lost our jobs. But this story doesn't end there. About a month after I was laid off, I got a call. It was Sean. He said they were expanding at AIS Consulting and asked if I'd be interested in coming in for an interview. I've been working here for 6 months now. It's everything our old company used to be, but better. The office is bright and full of energy. There are no mandatory wellness workshops, no buzzwords, no ideology. There's just a focus on being the best. Aaron is on the phone in his office, laughing with the Apex client, already discussing plans for the next 5 years. Ismael is standing in front of a giant whiteboard covered in his brilliant, chaotic diagrams, mapping out a market takeover. Sean is out on the floor, coaching a new hire, sharing his decades of experience. They took all the best people from the old company. They rescued us from the sinking ship. They didn't just get revenge, they built something better from the ashes. Last week, we closed a massive deal, the biggest in the company's short history. That afternoon, we all gathered in the kitchen. Sean brought out a bottle of something expensive. He poured everyone a glass, even the interns. He raised his glass and looked around at all of us, the survivors. He didn't make a long speech. He just said one thing, to merit. And we all drank to that.